black women to be perfect and save the world.
Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
We have committed that 50% of the class of the classes will be women or people of color. Today, only 19% of our pilots at United Airlines are women or people of color.
We have migrants that arrive from Texas virtually every day, hundreds, and we don't have places to put them.
Big Fani has some big problems. An update on the Fani Willis saga in Fulton County. Fine, we'll talk about the freaking Iowa caucuses. Airline, hey, just fly the plane. Don't worry about who's flying it. And border crisis stuff. The sanctuary state and sanctuary city of Illinois and Chicago, respectively, have some words for the evil governors that are calling them out on their sanctuary status. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Joe Bob. Thanks. Wow, I already said thanks. Today it is Monday, January 15th, the year of our Lord 2023. A lot of stuff to get to. First things first, and I can't. There's so much going on in this Iowa caucus thing that is frustrating to me, but it also, I would also like to point out the fact that I don't say this all the time, but I've been working in politics for long enough to understand how things work, especially in an election process, and how they relate to polls and all that, this, that, and the other thing. And I will tell you, right now, definitively, with, I don't know, more insight and knowledge, I don't even want to say that because it sounds like I'm being holier than thou. Nothing surprising is going to happen in Iowa. But we'll talk about it because that's what everybody's talking about. The Iowa caucus is today for the 2024 presidential election. Republicans are out at 7 p.m. Central Time to go caucus for their preferred candidate for president of the United States. Donald Trump is going to win. I was watching some news over the weekend, which I specifically said don't do on Friday, but I did it. I'm doing it. And the amount of fever pitch, what will happen? Will this happen? Will this happen? All the different variables, freaking meaningless. Like, effing meaningless. And I'll go through some of the variables for you, but I feel like there's a component of it that is just like, what are we doing talking about this at the extent that we're talking about? Is it completely insignificant? No. It is not the Republican primary debates, which are completely insignificant. But at the same time, the variables that exist in the cable news world where people are talking about them for hours and hours on end is freaking maddening because none of it matters. And I wonder who's watching that and thinking, well, this could happen and this could happen, this could happen and this could happen. Yeah, and again, we'll talk about some of the variables, but like only briefly because it doesn't really, like, Donald Trump is going to win. If that ends up not being the case, I don't know what I'll do. Somebody in the comment section suggest like a dare that I should do if Donald Trump, for some reason, doesn't get the nominate or doesn't win the Iowa caucus by a lot. Because I can't even imagine a scenario where that doesn't happen. So anyways, like I said, we'll talk about some of the variables, but wow, that was a longer screed than expected about the stupidity surrounding this. It's supposed to be -2 degrees in Iowa today. I think I checked the weather. It was -1 degrees earlier in the morning. What does that do? This is one of the topics that were spent hours and hours talking about, not only the weekend, but all of last week. The -degrees, what's that going to do? The people that are excited about their candidate are going to still show up and caucus. And who is excited about their candidate? Is it the rabid Nikki Haley fans? Is it the ardent Ron DeSantis caucusers? No. It's the Trump caucus people. They are the most motivated, they are the most enthusiastic, they are the most excited, and they are going to show up. So all of the conversation surrounding of how will the cold affect what's going on in Iowa, well, it won't. like at all. Now, I will say there are some variables that do exist that are going to make things interesting, but it won't make it interesting in the extent that it closes the gap in any significant way. I guarantee you that some high school gym where people are caucusing in more rural Iowa, the heater's going to go out. That's just, it will happen somewhere around the big state of Iowa where people are caucusing. And maybe that high school gym is a Trump precinct. Regardless of who it is, it's not going to matter. Is it interesting? Yes, it absolutely is interesting. But it isn't going to matter. The whole idea that Nikki Haley is trying to garner Democrats, I think exists, and sorry, I realized that was a hard transition there, but a lot of people, especially in more conservative circles, have been posting Nikki Haley videos of her saying things that make her sound very, very liberal. That's not the case. Nikki Haley is a conservative. I don't quite understand the Nikki Haley might as well be a Democrat. Well, if you understand what she's trying to do, you can recognize, oh, this is she actually thinks this, but this is what she's trying to do, and I can understand that from a campaigning standpoint. A bunch of people are posting videos about Nikki Haley talking about immigration, and I had the video snagged, but it wasn't worth playing. But the whole idea that Nikki Haley is as liberal as they come, like, dude, no, what she's trying to do is hopefully garner some support from Democrats. Iowa, if you don't know this, has a same-day voter registration policy where you can change your registration and register as a Republican and show up to the caucus and caucus for Nikki Haley if you're a Democrat. Now, the people saying that this is, well, what if Nikki Haley garners that side of the Democratic Party? That's a stupid object. That is a stupid variable. It's not going to make any difference for a couple reasons. Now, does the Nikki Haley camp think it might help? Yes. And I can see why they think it might help. The reason that it won't help is because any Democrat with enough sense to go to an Iowa caucus poll, change their registration to Republican, then caucus for Nikki Haley, aren't going to do so because those are the same people that are also smart enough to know that Nikki Haley is a bigger threat to Joe Biden running for president than Donald Trump is. So, again, people spent hours talking about this. Well, what if Nikki Haley's trying to garner the Democrat vote that can switch their party and caucus for her in Iowa? I think the Nikki Haley camp also bought into that. The problem is, doesn't make any freaking sense why anyone would do that, especially considering the temperatures there. If anyone's going to not show up to a caucus, it's going to be first the Nikki Haley Republicans and the Ron DeSantis Republicans. But in terms of, enthusiasm, you've got the Trump people, then you've got the Haley DeSantis people, and at the bottom of that heap are the people who aren't Republicans to begin with, but want to caucus for Nikki Haley, who's a bigger threat to their candidate. Anyways, the whole thing is stupid. Sorry, I realize that I'm just being a nihilist here in terms of my opinion on the Iowa caucus. But I think I just got frustrated and irritated, as should you have. That doesn't make any sense. As should you have. As everyone should have, of the incessant talking about the Iowa caucus and what will happen with all of these new variables and all of these new wrinkles. No, Donald Trump is going to win by a lot. Nikki Haley will probably come in second. And then going into New Hampshire, in an actual primary, that's where things, I don't know, maybe the polls are wrong. Maybe the polls won't indicate the actual winner. But in terms of how caucuses work, and the polling in Iowa, and the variables that exist, none of them make a difference. And again, if it turns out tomorrow morning I am dead wrong and Trump loses Iowa somehow, I will say, okay, cool, I know nothing about politics. But at the same time, I've worked in this industry running actual campaigns, not commentating, like actually on the ground, running campaigns, doing ad buys, organizing the ground game or the mail game, crafting speeches. I've done all of the things that the Iowa campaigns are doing. And from that perspective, I don't know, I guess I have at least I think, maybe I think too highly of myself, but I have a pretty good understanding of how this is going to shake out. And I will be beyond shocked if it doesn't turn out the exact way that everybody thinks it's going to turn out. But anyways, I want to move on because I feel like, well, I don't know. I feel like that's just, we've beat that horse enough to a pulp, but so we'll move on to this. Mostly because I also think this is really, really interesting. Sanctuary my butt. Now, this isn't new information necessarily, but it is interesting to get more and more pieces to the border crisis sanctuary city relationship. We've already talked about the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, saying, please stop sending people here. Well, now we have a new person who is out in front of cameras saying, this cannot continue, talking specifically to Governor Abbott of Texas busing illegal immigrants to their state, and that is J.B. Pritzker, the trust fund kid who is now the governor of Illinois, who, statistically speaking, will probably end up in jail at some point. I feel like, what is it, the last 4 out of 5 Illinois governors have ended up in jail? Some crazy statistic like that. But the pre-inmate, J.B. Pritzker, was on one of the talk shows this weekend talking about how this is absolutely unsustainable. There's no way that we can continue doing this in Illinois. And I want to give you some fun facts of some past legislation that J.B. Pritzker himself signed into law. But first, watch this on ABC This Week, the governor of Illinois.
Not enough has been done. There's no doubt about that. And I think that the president needs to do more. The Congress needs to do more. Cities out here that are the target of this political game that Governor Abbott is playing are suffering. And here in Illinois, it's minus 29 degrees outside with the wind chill. We have migrants that arrive from Texas virtually every day, hundreds, and we don't have places to put them. We don't have enough shelter space here. There are plenty of other cities where, you know, if he's going to send people, they could be sent. But no, he's choosing only Democratic states, Democratic cities.
Well, yeah, you can make that argument, but then again, remember, Democrat cities and Democrat states have been the most vocal about their support for illegal immigration. We are a sanctuary city. In fact, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois signed 4 pieces of legislation to make Illinois the most welcoming state to illegal immigrants. Illinois, in their populace, voted for this. The governor signed it into law. And in 2021, this was a press release from the governor's office himself saying this. Governor J.B. Pritzker today signed HB 121, SB 667, SB 5. You don't care about the actual numbers of the bills. But he signed 4 bills into law, legislation expanding protections for immigrants and refugee communities and further establishing Illinois as the most welcoming state in the nation. This is coming from the governor's office himself, the same guy that said, I can't believe the Texas governor is sending people to our state. Even though you said in legislation, please send people to our state. That's how I read that. And maybe you're just saying, well, if you are going to end up here, then we will welcome you with open arms. That doesn't necessarily mean send people to the state. Okay, well, fine. Now we're playing semantics here. The bottom line is he himself signed 4 different bills and then put a press release out that stated we're the most welcoming state in the nation, and now is complaining about being called out on the fact that, well, maybe they're not as welcoming as they might think. Now, the reason I think this is important from a political standpoint is that Democrats running these big blue states that are sanctuary states and so welcoming get credit for the nice things that they say. And if you're going to get credit for the nice things that you say, you have to face the repercussions of what that policy brings you. And if that policy that is crafted around nice-sounding things, and you get credit for that, you also deserve consequences for how bad that policy is and how bad it is for your people. If there weren't any advantages to saying this sort of nonsense, they wouldn't say it. But there is. There's a political advantageous feature that comes with being like JB says, the most welcoming state in the nation. Fine, you're allowed to say that. You're allowed to craft policy that makes you that, if that's what you want to be. And at the same time, if that brings pretty bad consequences to your constituents, your state, your political standing in the country as a whole, even in your state specifically, guess what? You took the advantage by saying the nice things and crafting the nice policies. Now you have to reap what you sowed. It's just how the world works. I'm going to continue with this statement issued by the governor himself. The new laws strengthen the Trust Act and make Illinois the second state in the nation to require local officials to end partnerships with ICE. Now, if you're not hip to the whole sanctuary thing, sanctuary cities and sanctuary states basically said, all right, our local law enforcement at a city level or at a county level or at a state level no longer will notify the immigration people at the federal government level when we have somebody in their custody. If the federal immigration asks the Chicago PD or wherever that is a sanctuary city, hey, do you have so-and-so? He's here illegally. He's been charged with a bunch of stuff. They will say nothing. Exactly. That's what sanctuary status means. And in this press release, Pritzker is bragging about that. The second state in the nation to require local law officials to end partnerships with ICE. It also addresses hate crimes against immigrant communities, which he is perpetrating himself right now. At least I would say. Expands workplace protections for DACA recipients and creates the Illinois Immigration Impact Task Force to ensure state programs and policies best serve the immigrant residents. We'll continue, too, because the press release goes on about all of the great things that J.B. Pritzker did on purpose and got a political advantage from. Governor Pritzker also signed an executive order creating the Welcoming Illinois Office to report to the Office of the Governor and the Secretary of the Department of Health Human Services while being housed and supported by the Department of Human Services. So he created an entire office welcoming people to Illinois. And once the people showed up in Illinois, regardless of how they got there, they go, oh no, we can't handle this. Again, I know this is not new information and this is not the first time a big blue governor or mayor of a city or state says, well, this is, how are we supposed to handle this? I understand that this is not new. But the irony is too great in too many places to not continue to talk about it. Because like I've said many times before, this is the best political stunt I think anyone has ever pulled. Ever. And yes, it is a political stunt. To people say, they're using illegal immigrants as a political pawn. Correct. You know why? Because you all use them as political pawns. To say we're not going to cooperate with the Federal Immigration Services, to say that we are the most welcoming state. So, double-edged sword here. It goes both ways. If you don't want to be caught in a political maneuver trap, don't set it up. I don't know. There's a part of me that feels good about this sort of stuff, but there's also a part of me that's just this is so stupid. This is the dumbest freaking thing that a global superpower is fighting internally about. This is not a difficult situation. The overwhelming majority of the polls say, yeah, just go fix the border crisis. And the administration and Congress can do that. And I'll even say this, there are some crazy hardline Republicans, and there's not many, that say absolutely no more immigrant. I think, maybe it's not even necessarily in Congress, but in the media talking world, zero compromise. Well, that's dumb too. The problem can be fixed, but we are collectively choosing not to. And this idiotic practice in circular firing squattery is stupid. There was also a story out, and this is sad, but again, this is a downstream symptom of a much, much bigger issue. There's a story out that a bunch of your lefty media outlets are picking up on. A woman and her children were caught in the river along Shelby Park, which is that area in, oh shoot, where is Shelby Park again? Eagle Pass, I think, where Texas state troopers told the federal government, well, you're not doing your job, so you can't come in. A mother and her children drowned in the river there, which is again horrible. Nobody wants to see that, regardless of the person's immigration status. Nobody wants to see a mother and her kids get swept away in a river. The problem that I have with this is how it's being reported, what people are saying about it, and the just overt blame placing and flat out lying about it. U.S. Representative Henry Cuellar, who's a Democrat from, I believe, the El Paso area, but I also could be wrong about where he is specifically, but in Texas, says that the drowning happened specifically because Border Patrol agents were unable to reach them to help after the Texas Department blocked the federal government's access to the park earlier this week. I don't even... Engaging in this is so idiotic and dumb. Like, one, you have to assume then that if Texas wasn't blocking federal immigration officials from that area, then they absolutely would have saved these people who, again, this is tragic regardless of how you slice it. But one, that has to happen. You have to be 100%, in order to say something like that, you have to be 100% confident that if Texas wasn't blocking federal Border Patrol agents, they definitely would have saved them, which is a crazy thing to have assumed. And then you have to gloss over the entirety of the fact of, this is a crazy way of doing things. And when you do things a crazy way, terrible things are going to happen. I don't know what you do with this, other than just fix the problem. And the problem can be fixed, and yet we choose continually and consistently to not fix it. Let's see. Anything in the comment section that's worth bringing up and reading? So the big, long comments are difficult to go through. So just so you know. I appreciate the big, long comments with explanations and arguments and all that sort of stuff, but difficult to go through and read on screen. All right, let's move on to this, as we are good and upset about the border. Come on to this funnier-ish story. Big Fani continues to be in big trouble. Remember the story we brought last week where Fani Willis, the DA of Fulton County, Georgia, that is charging the president and 18 other co-defendants in a bunch of stuff, got in big trouble because she's dating one of the lead prosecutors. Broke her silence, which is, I don't know if I like that term, but she spoke at a church in Georgia over the weekend and defended herself, and guess what? This is going to shock you. This is going to shock everybody here. Blamed the problem, sorry, not the problem necessarily. She blamed the criticism of her, not because sleeping with a prosecutor that you hired and paid an absurd amount of money is an issue. No. That's not the reason why people are criticizing her. The reason is, you guessed it, because she is a black woman. Watch this, and then we'll get to the nitty-gritty on this thing as it continues to unfold. Here's her speaking at a church in the area. Watch this.
You cannot expect black women to be perfect and save the world. The Lord is completing us. We are not perfect. We need your prayers. We need to be allowed to stumble. We need grace. With that kind of support, we will move mountains and do Jesus' will. stumbling all the way.
I'm sorry, I actually, and you probably also were, expecting black women to not only be perfect, but also to save the world. And thankfully, Big Fani Willis is here to tell you that that's not a reasonable expectation that I know you had and I had and we all had. That was the expectation, but ever since that speech was made, it no longer is, because I was wrong in expecting, again, black women not only to be perfect, but to save the world, which of course was a reasonable expectation to have up until we were reminded that it's not a reasonable expectation to have by the one Miss Big Fani Willis. A couple things to note here as this again continues to unfold. This is from The Hill. Willis, speaking Sunday at a congregation, yada yada yada, did not directly address the allegations of improper relationship with Wade, but fiercely rejected the claims that she acted improper in hiring Wade in the state's election interference case involving Trump and more than a dozen other co-defendants. She continued on in her speech on Sunday. I'm a little confused. I appointed 3 special counselors. It's my right to do so, paid them all the same hourly rate. They only attacked one, Willis said Sunday. I hired one white woman, a good person, a good personal friend, and a great lawyer, a superstar. I tell you, I hired one white man, brilliant, my friend, and a great lawyer, and I hired one black man, another superstar, a great friend, and a great lawyer. She did not name him specifically, the Hill mentioned, but says the lawyer had impeccable credentials. Okay, well, if that's the game you're going to play here, and again continue to blame this entirely and specifically on race, well, I'm a black woman, you all expected me to be perfect and save the world, and the only criticism you have is the hiring of the one black man. Nobody questioned the hiring of the white woman or the white man. Okay, here's the response to that. Were you sleeping with either one of them two? Because if that's the case as well, and that is the criteria that one must meet to be hired as a special prosecutor by Big Fani Willis, then I also have a problem with those two. But at least to my knowledge as of right now, the only one that you were sleeping with was the one that everyone's criticizing. Again, nothing to do with race at all, and yet that's the excuse being made. Well, they're only doing this because he's a black man. No, honestly, the first I read about this story, there weren't any pictures. I didn't know that he was a black man. His name is Nathan Wade, and regardless of the amount of pigment in this guy's skin, probably not okay to be paying him $600,000 to be a special prosecutor in a case that he's wholly unqualified for. Get this, this is even CNN talking here. Wade had once been a prosecutor, but mostly handled misdemeanors and never handled such a high-profile case. The dude has never tried a felony before, and all of a sudden, after not being a prosecutor for 10 years, I think he was he a judge? Somebody said he was a judge for a while. After not having been a prosecutor for a decade, and only having handled misdemeanor cases in his time as a prosecutor, now he's in charge of prosecuting the President of the United States on a RICO charge? Holy cow! That, nothing says qualified than having never done the job before and then being paid handsomely for doing the job. The judge overseeing the case said that on Friday he planned to hold a hearing on the allegations in early February. And this is also interesting, an interesting tidbit and wrinkle in the situation. Expense reports that Wade filed include an exhibit, included in the exhibit of Roman's filing, which is the lawsuit against the DA, which brought all of this to the surface, shows a phone call with the White House's counsel in May 2022, and an interview with DC/White House in November 2022 as well. What that means is, well, is the county DA's office working with the White House to bring down their biggest political opponent? oh shoot, if that's the case, that would mean there's collusion. Have you guys heard that word before, collusion? CNN does point out that the White House logs in November do not contain any entrance for Nathan Wade, but the bottom line is that still needs to get uncovered. The article in the Hill goes on, or sorry, in CNN goes on, and to their credit, they do point this out. One line stood out to multiple lawyers who reviewed Wade's billing documents, including in the motion filed by Roman. November 5th, 2021, Wade billed the Fulton County DA's office for 24 hours of service in one day at a rate of $250 per hour. But, okay, the only reason that anybody is criticizing Fani and Nathan Wade is because of their skin color. That's the only reason. Not entirely sure what a prosecutor can do in a 24-hour period by themselves. And to be fair, I don't know if this is his entire office, but I would imagine that multiple lawyers who reviewed this wouldn't be jumping at this particular line if it was multiple attorneys in a particular office. They're probably looking at him consistently. So all of this is to say that his billing of the Fulton County, which again is totally legit, says that he worked for 24 hours straight at a rate of $250 per hour in one single day. But again, the only reason we're criticizing any of this is because both of them are black. Which is a real, like, what a disadvantage that puts competent minorities in when you try and pull stuff like this. I feel like I feel like a broken record having said this so many times, but if you exaggerate claims of racism, it provides cover for actual racism. And I've never been a person that says racism in this country does not exist. It exists at a substantially lower level than the media would have you believe. But of the racism that does exist, stunts like this diminish actual racism. All right. Let's see. Do we want to get to this? Maybe we'll save this for tomorrow. This plane thing. Yeah, we'll save it for tomorrow. Probably because I rambled too much, because that's what I do a lot. Ramble.
You cannot expect...
Oh, dang it. I gotta remember to mute that thing. There we go. Now that it's muted. Appreciate you sticking around, tuning in. If you haven't already, give me a follow on any of your social media platforms. Just type in JOBOB, you'll be able to find me pretty much anywhere. Let's see, we'll be back same time, same place tomorrow with any of the results from the Iowa caucus that happen. I would imagine that we're going to get a pretty early evening. Let's see, caucuses start at 7, maybe 8 o'clock Central Time. We will have a definitive, oh yeah, it's Trump, just like everyone expected. And none of the variables that people talked about for hours on end on cable news and NPR over however many days mattered at all. So we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place. God bless America.
You cannot expect black women to be perfect and save the world.
And we don't have places to put them